Hello, greetings to all you armchair economists out there. This is Proof of Pod, episode 5. One engineer today, still no hair. I am joined today by our guest, Max Hillebrand.
Well, hello. Hi, David. Hello, audience. Good to see you.
Hello.
Well, you do have hair, man. It's just all in the beard, you know?
Yeah, it's growing the wrong way.
Yes, yes. But still growing.
So, in episode 3, we were talking with one of the producers of the What Bitcoin Did podcast, and he mentioned you as like one of his favorite economists. Is that does that come up for you a lot, where people are just like, "Oh, you gotta talk to this guy"?
Yeah, no, definitely. Economics is a really fun area of study that I fell down that rabbit hole quite early.
Mhm.
And I think it's an extremely applicable and valuable thing to know. What is economics? What's the reason for businesses and production and firms and money and
Yeah.
banking and interest and all of these. At first it thinks, okay, this is just interesting for the business world, but ultimately I think it's extremely valuable way of life that can totally affect you for your friendships as well as your families.
And what's your educational background, or like what did you do before all this?
Well, economics is the main area of study that I was interested in.
Okay.
I started with just working quite early in life, hustling where we can be productive. And so I wanted to see what entrepreneurship is all about, and found initially the Keynesian Economics School, which is, of course, the mainstream and the first thing that comes up once you Google it. But didn't quite get that. It sounded weird and didn't quite make sense.
Yes.
So I kept hunting for alternatives and eventually found the Chicago schools and Milton Friedman, and thankfully finally the Austrians with Mises and especially Rothbard and Hoppe, that I think just have an extremely eloquent explanation of the definition and solution to the problem that is economics, and that helped me to understand the importance of specifically sound money.
Mhm.
Where then, as later another friend sent me down the open source rabbit hole,
Mhm.
with Linux and all these, which I found quite interesting, because according to Austrian economics, there is no property in intellectual goods. Information
Mhm.
is non-scaled and it ought to be shared freely,
Mhm.
because that's just great. We can solve more problems if we all collaborate and share our information and strategies. So that made me very interested in open source, just from a philosophical standpoint.
Yeah.
And as I discovered Bitcoin and realized that, wow, this is a open source protocol for a sound monetary system with permissionless access, and seemingly unstoppable. So
Mhm.
this, of course, really impressed me on further consideration. And then, the journey into the rabbit hole began.
Yeah. All right. You've already mentioned like half a dozen things that I want to go down. But let's stick on this topic for another minute. So you're like a real economist. You're not like amateur economist like most of us Bitcoiners and crypto people.
Well, I mean, like, kind of. I do have a
Like you have a
bachelor
degree
degree
in economics.
in economics. Yeah, but that's in Keynesian economics, right?
Uh,
So, like, sure, I got a paper certificate from some authority telling me that I sat through the classes. Great. That doesn't prove jack shit about my economic skills. So all the real shit that you got to know about in economics, I picked it up on Mises.org. You don't need a degree for that.
you mentioned kind of like your journey. When did you first hear about Bitcoin?
First, probably around like 2012, 2013, something that around. But as any first time, you ignore it.
Yeah.
Back then, I was mainly interested in economics and have not yet discovered free software. So
Mm.
that's why I didn't understand the software side of Bitcoin. It was like, no, like, information cannot be scarce. It's not property. Like, there's something
Hmm.
fishy. And so didn't really look further into it.
Yeah.
But then in the 2016, 2017 era, I had to think more about it, and yeah, fell in love with it at that point.
Yeah, I heard your orange pill story or whatever on another interview that you did. It's kind of similar to me. Like I heard about Bitcoin in 2011. I like tried to do a little mining on my work computer that didn't even have a GPU. I was kind of like, well, this isn't backed by anything. Yeah. I even wrote Peter Schiff. I was like, hey, like, I'm a software engineer. Like, let me create a gold backed, crypto for you. And he was not into it. But and then I got back into it in 2014 when I was kind of going through a career and life transition and started to click more. For me, it was like poker really, like going to different poker sites that were using Bitcoin. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like Bitcoin enables a lot of cool use cases, and throughout, like the services that merchants provide cannot provide a great service other than when they would be using Bitcoin. I think this is where adoption will shine.
Mm,
When customers will have to adopt certain technologies in order to get the product that they want.
mm,
This is usually the path of technological adoptions.
yeah. Real quick on that adoption idea. What do you think about like broad adoption of Bitcoin? Is it happening? Going to happen? Is it necessary?
It's happening. It's necessary, but like not to the extent that I think a lot of people think. I mean, obviously, if everyone on the entire planet would be using Bitcoin, to save and transact, that would be awesome. But I don't think that this is the actual metric of success. I think it's much more important that Bitcoin works for the people who need it, regardless of the time. Right? And I think Bitcoin has done an excellent job throughout its history. Like in 2011, Bitcoin was extremely useful, and it worked for the few people who actually used it. It worked just fine,
Right.
and all throughout its journey, it just has managed to be useful for a larger and larger amount of people, and that's great. This number going up is awesome. However, I think Bitcoin is already a like massive success, and we've long
Yeah.
surpassed the goals of it is a stable monetary system in
Yeah.
cyberspace that is up, that can be used, and that has not been shut down. Maybe cannot be shut down.
Yeah.
This is extremely promising. So to my mind, like we're already living in hyper Bitcoinization.
Yeah.
It's just right now you still can choose to not, but if you really want to live in hyper Bitcoinization, you can do it for many years already. Just
Yeah.
drop fiat.
Yeah. I think we're pretty much on the same page there. For a number of years, I got into Bitcoin and a number of other things kind of through my libertarian or even anarchist ideals. And for a long time, I was like evangelistic about it, and like it would frustrate me, but like now I feel like, hey, I'm going to benefit, I'm going to enjoy the benefits for myself of Bitcoin, enjoy the benefits of like understanding, like what's really going on in the world, hopefully, and not be caught off guard and not be taken advantage of quite as much as people who aren't, understanding, economics and Bitcoin and government and banking and all that kind of stuff the way that I hopefully understand it better than them.
Yeah, and I mean, even though like you have a larger amount of experience in a certain niche, um, uh, Bitcoin is such a fundamental technology that it even alters your niche substantially. Right? Even if that's finance or healthcare or gardening, etc., heavy industry and such, Bitcoin touches all of these areas in life, and therefore, sure, you might know a lot about a certain subject, but after
Yeah.
experiencing Bitcoin, you will very likely discover a lot more cool things
Yeah.
in that niche that you had no idea before. Like I thought of myself like a decent economist before I discovered Bitcoin, but in
Yeah.
hidesight, I knew nothing, right? I had no idea. And through Bitcoin, I learned a lot more about the nuances and just fascinating implications that a couple of years ago I had no idea of.
Yeah. So, you mentioned that you kind of discovered like open source, or I guess became interested in open source software after you got into Bitcoin. Is that?
Well, so my first introduction to Bitcoin was before I got into free software.
Mhm.
So I did not know about the realm of cyberspace much. I haven't thought about it more than, using a computer like every day, but that's it. So that's when I first ignored Bitcoin, because I was missing the gravitas of the software technology breakthrough that Bitcoin represents.
Mhm.
But after thinking a bit more about software and computers, and experiencing free software and running Linux, and seeing like, oh, holy shit, this is insane. Like something as complex as an operating system can be coordinated like without a corporate structure by just voluntary interaction of hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of developers, writing an insanely complex production stages network of code and infrastructure that needs to emerge for these tools to actually function. It's insane. So I think just for that, free software is a fascinatingly interesting economic study
Yeah.
of why and how and why does it work so well.
Yeah.
And again, I think the Austrians are the only ones who can properly explain what the fuck's happening there.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, I can't jump ahead, but I am interested in kind of like the economics of free software. I mean, like I'm a former software developer myself. I did that job full time for about 17 years, and I like to consider myself an innovator, and so I'm very interested in Wasabi Wallet. My personal interest isn't so much about the product itself. Um, my personal interest is more about like how do you bootstrap something like that? How do you get you have an idea and how do you get it going? But let's talk about like what Wasabi Wallet is.
Yeah, so um, maybe to tackle your question, like there's usually the arguments against free software is, oh, like if nobody gets paid for it, then nobody
Yes.
will build it, right?
Yes.
And you can only get paid for it if you guard your trademark secrets and you
Yes.
don't share the secret sauce with everyone. But
Yes.
like if you look fundamentally at humanity, like that's just not the case,
Right.
right? We can share information with others, and that doesn't mean that you give up that piece of information. You
Yes.
retain it, right? You still have the same knowledge that you have after speaking.
Yes.
Quite on the contrary, the way that someone else reacts about this information gives you new insight, right? He might have thought about it in some different way and can give you a different viewpoint on the same problem, or maybe an interesting next problem to study that you would not have thought about yourself. And so sharing information is mutually beneficial, and comes at no
Yeah.
expense.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's for one the ethical thing to do, and I would argue also the profitable thing to do.
Yeah.
So it is absolutely possible to run a profitable business that has 100% of its code free and open source that can be
Yeah.
copied by anyone else. And I think Wasabi Wallet is a prime example. That's the roundabout introduction to what Wasabi is. Well, for one, it is a Bitcoin wallet, right? So you install it on your desktop, and you can generate a new wallet. You can receive Bitcoin and send Bitcoin, with the main feature of it takes care of your privacy all throughout, on numerous different levels. There is security in depth with hopefully many layers of defense. But I think what's very fascinating about Wasabi is that it has grown into a quite substantial team of people working on it. I think the last release had 28 code contributors,
Mm.
and an insane amount of progress. So it is a very flourishing open source project,
Mm.
and not just for the development side, but also for the user side. There's users of the backend of the software who make money by providing services in the infrastructure. Those companies then in turn pay people who work on the free and open source software infrastructure.
Yeah.
And likewise on the user side, this software solves a lot of problems for users, and especially in a very cheap and efficient way. Right? So when you don't use Wasabi and you want to use Bitcoin privately, it's very expensive, very difficult, it's very slow. But you can just use Wasabi, and then you are private, very cheap,
Mm.
very fast, and without much of a hassle. And this means you decrease your cost, right? Wasabi saves a large amount of money for our users every time it is being used, because it's a very efficiently designed system, and therefore users are happy to pay for the service provider because they already save like 90%. They get a 90% discount on the cost that they otherwise would have paid. So paying a 0.3% fee to the service provider is still a very, very profitable deal. And this is just an example of a win-win-win-win situation that we can design in cyberspace and in the companies and services that we provide.
Like you're touching on so many things that I love the theoretical discussions. Like let me just take a quick tangent. Like the whole idea of like intellectual, it's not tangents regarding what you said, but regarding the whole intellectual property, like we always get the lie, in my opinion, that like intellectual property is to protect creators and like small people. And I think, regarding related to what you're talking about, intellectual property really is like stifling creativity. Also, like intellectual property laws don't actually protect the little people. It protects the companies, big companies that are able to make those laws work for them. But what would you say if I said, like, I think that this whole idea of like intellectual property ownership has held back development because we're only able to advance software under this intellectual property paradigm, and so like a lot of free, open source development that might have put us in a better world is not done because, like, if I have a business plan and I can't protect my intellectual property or make a profit off of it, then it's just a non-starter.
I think one principle here is that if the product is shit, you're not going to get rich with it in any case. And so first and foremost, you need to solve an actual problem in an elegant way. And with most things, you alone are not going to solve it. You simply need to collaborate with others to solve the really important problems. And sure, you can rally a lot of people to your cause, pay them salaries, get them to think and work on the same problems. But your capital base is limited, and you can't hire a huge amount of people. So how about getting support for free from other people, and that is possible with free and open source software. We have received numerous security vulnerabilities and patch fixes and improvements that were basically donated to the project by people who didn't want to get paid for it. They just were using the software and wanted it to be better. And because it was free and open source, they could review the source code, see what the actual problem was, and even work on a solution. And they can run the solution by themselves on their own laptop, and that's perfectly fine. But even better, they contribute back to us by telling us what the problem was and what the solution is. So that then everyone else gets to benefit by having a software that works just a little bit better. And again, this has happened hundreds, thousands of times for this project. And these small improvements definitely build up. So Wasabi would be a way worse product if fewer people worked on it. And it's simply much better by everyone having the ability, just the ability to look at the code and see what's going on. And that even extends to extremely large teams. Like, for example, about a year ago, we announced with Trezor, one of the largest Bitcoin hardware wallet producers, who also has a software companion application called Trezor Suite, the desktop app you use to connect your hardware wallet to. And they wanted to integrate coin joins, one of the primary features that we have worked on in Wasabi Wallet. And so we started a research back in 2019. And so this was a extremely long process of research and development, from the original idea to discovering numerous problems. So it was like, we had the idea, so Trezor guys and Wasabi guys, we talked about it at a conference. Then the Spectre developers, and another hardware wallet, quote unquote, competing with Trezor, right, comes along and said, "Yo, this is a cool idea, but there's a critical security vulnerability in the protocol that you're proposing. Here's the solution how to fix it." And so we didn't have to pay him for that, but we just told him about this awesome idea. He got excited and thought about it more and made it a lot better. Right?
Yeah.
Until then, later, I think Trezor at Satoshi Labs, over 20 people worked on integrating CoinJoin into their product, all things considered.
Yeah.
And that is substantial. Right? Again, I alone could never do this. I don't even write a single line of code. Right?
Okay.
So I have to communicate and collaborate with others.
Yeah.
And being open and transparent is simply the best option.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, imagine where like physics would be if like all the scientists were like hoarding their own research, right?
Exactly. No, these are my numbers. Don't look at them.
Yeah. Okay, so let's try to get some of the brass tacks. I love all the theoretical stuff though. So Wasabi is desktop only. Is that what you said?
Yeah, exactly. Wasabi is heavy duty software. It's not kindergarten stuff.
Yeah.
It's quite heavy. And so we simply have no idea on how we could run such a stack on mobile. There's initial work towards that, but it really is just bloody difficult. So we'd rather do the job really well for desktop and servers, where we can ensure decent privacy guarantees.
Yes. And you said it saves users money or fees. Now that's with respect to coin joining, right? Like you're not saving the transaction fees of Bitcoin, are you?
So what I meant when I said that is, so let's assume you've received some coins in the past, and other people know that these coins are yours, right? Especially the person who sent it to you, but maybe also some like the wallet provider, because you send all of your addresses to that computer asking for how much money do I have, for example. So some people, or maybe everyone, knows that these addresses belong to you. And you would like to, hold these coins and spend them without everyone knowing that. So what you can do is just make a new Bitcoin transaction by yourself. So on the input side, you spend the coin that you received in the past, let's say 10 Bitcoin, and then on the output side, you create a fake payment, right? So you say, okay, I'm making a payment of 7 Bitcoin to someone else now. It's actually still your address, right? But you try to trick other people, thinking that this is no longer your address.
Yeah.
And the second output is your change output, where you get the 3 Bitcoin back. So now you've made a transaction, you've spent the coin that you had to yourself, but to an outside observer, they are now unsure if this was a self-spend, if you're trying to trick them, or if you actually just bought a Lambo for 7 Bitcoin.
Yes.
And this means you introduce ambiguity. Now there's uncertainty of who actually owns this coin. Still the same guy, or maybe a merchant. Right, and which merchant, etc. But if you do that once, it's not really that much ambiguity. Right? I still have a pretty good chance that at least one of these coins is the same guy. And so you would have to do that multiple times, right? Not just one transaction to yourself, but then a second as well. Now, if in the second transaction you spend those 2 coins that you have, 7 and 3, if you spend them together, then someone knows, okay, actually he didn't send the money to someone else. Because later, both coins were spent in the same transaction, and that doesn't happen, right? Usually, all inputs in the transaction belong to the same person. So now I know, hey, the same person owns those coins. Meaning, if I want to make a second hop, so to say, I need to make 2 more transactions. One spending the 7 Bitcoin into 2 and 5, and another separate transaction a day later or so, because if I make the 2 transactions at the same time, probably the same person. And so a day later, I make a transaction spending the 3 Bitcoin into 2 and 1.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, I have
and ideally to a different address.
Exactly. Each time to a different address. Otherwise, it doesn't also make sense. But so as you see now I've already made like 3 transactions, and I have 4 UTXOs, 4 coins in my wallet now, and still not really much privacy. And so if I really want to get quite a lot of ambiguity, I need to make like 10 hops, which means that's like 1,000 or 100 transactions, and you end up with like 200, 300 coins or something like this. So that's quite expensive, right? You need to pay for all of those block space to create those coins, and then to spend the coin again, just so that you can create the next one and such. So that costs a lot of block space. And basically what coin joins do is to say, hey, instead of everyone making these transactions to himself alone, let's make it all together. Right? So hundreds of users, instead of each by themselves making a transaction to themselves, they get together in a single transaction, with 300 inputs and 300 outputs, but it's coordinated in such a way that nobody really knows how many inputs does one user have, or
Yes.
which inputs belong to the same user,
Yeah.
and which input paid for which output, for example, is also not really known. And then how many outputs did the same user get, or which outputs belong to the same user, nobody knows either.
Yeah.
So we increase the ambiguity by increasing the number of possible interpretations of
Yes.
who could have spent this money and where could it have gone. The more users there are, and the more coins we create, and the bigger these transactions get, the larger is the crowd that we can hide in. And this makes CoinJoins a very efficient block space savings technology. And it's also very fast because it's done in a single transaction. That they happen like every 20, 30 minutes or so. And that makes it just very appealing.
Nice. So apart from, obviously, like, totally understand what you're saying, very, important, privacy feature, but just to get a little more granular, apart from the coin joining benefits, if you had like 300 transactions and you didn't coin join them versus 300 transactions and you did, is it still kind of like the same transaction fees on the Bitcoin network, or is it more or less?
Okay, yes. So let's, for example, say you make 300 transactions by yourself, and each transaction has one input, two outputs, roughly. And you make this by yourself. Or you partake in 300 CoinJoin transactions, where you also have one input and two outputs. The trick here is actually, with the CoinJoins, you pay a little bit less in block space or transaction fee, because each transaction has the inputs, the outputs, and the transaction header, kind of the title of the transaction.
Yeah.
And in a single user transaction, you have to pay 100%. All of the header you have to pay.
Yes.
But in a CoinJoin transaction, there's hundreds of users sharing one single transaction header.
Okay.
Meaning no costs get amortized and split across users. And how much did your privacy improve? Well, quite substantially.
Yes.
Right? Because now if I want to look at these 300 transactions, 300 transactions each have 300 inputs and 300 outputs. So that means I look at the first, that has 300 options, times the second, 300, times the second, times the third, 300. Yeah. So 300 times 300 times 300, 300 to the power of 300. That's quite a lot of numbers. Right? That's a really big number.
Right. Yeah. I mean, with a normal single transaction, there's only really two possibilities. One, you paid somebody and kept some, or you paid yourself, and split it up. Yeah. But I did not know that you could save some block space with CoinJoin. Do you have any figures on that? Is it like 10% savings or 1% savings, 0.1, anything like that?
To be honest, the savings are possible in theory, but with the current implementation of especially Wasabi Wallet, we have not, we do optimize for being block space efficient and being smart about our block space usage, but we do not take it to the extreme. Mm-hmm. So it's with Wasabi not easily possible, or actually not possible, to always only register one input, two outputs, etc. Mm-hmm. Wasabi will automatically create more outputs and split up a larger coin into smaller coins, which improves your privacy substantially. Mm-hmm. So instead of giving you one change coin back, one change output, you get 3 or 4 back. Right? So you have to pay for a little bit more block space, but in result, you get a lot more privacy. Yeah. And when you get a lot more privacy with a single transaction, you don't have to do many transactions. Yeah. And so we are offering a way of using the software that is quite cautious of how much money is being spent on block space. We could take this even more to the extreme. Yeah. Or someone else who writes a client and forks our code and writes his own CoinJoin logic software can optimize it for other things.
Good. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't mean to take the focus off the important feature of coin joining, which is the privacy feature, to put focus on an efficiency thing. I was just kind of curious about that. Mm-hmm. So as long as we're talking about the fees, with Wasabi Wallet, coins with a value above 0.01 BTC costs 0.3% as a coordinator fee. And inputs of 0.01 BTC or below don't pay coordinator fees. So I'm getting that off your website. So I assume that's accurate.
Yes, exactly. So basically, for every input that you register, you pay a 0.3% fee. So if you register 1 Bitcoin, that means I get 300,000 cents. However, for a lot of inputs, you don't have to pay a fee. So as you just read on the website, if the coin is smaller than 1 million sats, that's like what, $700 right now, $700 or something.
You keep saying the coin. You mean like the address?
Basically, the address. An address is, for all intents and purposes, a public key, versus a coin is a public key that's written on the blockchain, right, next to how much money is locked up in this public key.
Okay.
So a coin is basically a public key plus an amount.
Okay.
However, then, for example, so if you have a small value coin, less than $700 worth roughly, which means like someone paid you, you give someone an address and he sends to you $500 worth of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
For this coin that you just received, you don't have to pay any fee at all. And then also, regardless of how much the money is worth, after you make your first round of a coin join, so you spend the coin that you received from a friend, and you send it to yourself on a new set of addresses. Those addresses that were generated in the coin join itself don't pay the fee anymore for the second round of coin join. So it's not that every time you make a coin join you have to pay 0.3% again.
Yes.
So you only pay for the very first round for every fresh money that you've received, and afterwards you don't have to pay again. And it's not just you that doesn't have to pay; it's even your friends. And so after someone paid you, you made the coin join, you paid the fee for it. Now you want to pay your friend back for dinner or something, and he also uses Wasabi or Trezor or BTCPay or any of the other CoinJoin compatible wallets. He also will not have to pay the coordinator fee anymore, because he's your friend and you've already paid the fee for your friend, so to say.
Okay. I'm learning some things about CoinJoin that I didn't really know before, so that's great. In Wasabi, is the CoinJoin feature optional?
No, actually, it is on by default. You can opt out of it, but Wasabi has a really strong, it's a very opinionated wallet. And we believe that privacy must be the default. Because users need to be protected by default, and privacy is a very cheap level of defense, which makes attacks very expensive. So in order to save lives and protect humans, we need to protect them by default, even when they might not exactly know that there is a threat out there and what exactly the threat is and how to best defend itself against it. So basically, there are 3 important privacy features in Wasabi that are all turned on by default. So the first is the Tor network, and we're a very sophisticated user of the Tor client that comes packaged and bundled inside Wasabi Wallet. We started automatically, we connect to the network automatically, we manage Tor identities automatically. Whenever you make a coin join, for each coin that you register, each input, each API call, basically, we create a new Tor identity, calculate a new route through the Tor network, and send your traffic completely uncorrelated to all of the other traffic. So that nobody knows that these 2 API calls actually came from the same person. So Tor is bundled on by default. You can turn it off. You shouldn't, but it's possible. And the second is, how do you find out how much money you have? Right? You can generate your private and public keys locally on your own machine without any internet connection. But then how do you ever know if this public key is mentioned on the blockchain? Right? You need to synchronize the blockchain. And for this, you have to run a full node. Right? A full node connects to the internet, to the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network, and downloads every block that has ever happened, every transaction that other people have made in the network. You have to download all of them and verify all of them. And so this is quite expensive in bandwidth, in computation and storage.
Yeah.
And so not
We
many
talked
people
about
want
that
to run a full node.
previously.
Yeah. So a easy solution here is you let someone else run the full node.
Yes.
He downloads all the blocks, he verifies everything. And you take your addresses and you send those addresses to your friend, saying to him, hey, these 100 addresses belong to me. Please scan them through the blockchain and tell me how much Bitcoin is on there. And give me all the information that I need in order to spend those Bitcoin later. And the server can do that. Right? There's, for example, Electrum server is a client and server that does that. Works really fast, very performant, great for large wallets and such. The obvious downside is now that other guy knows all of your addresses. And he knows these 100 addresses belong to the same person. And this is how much money he has. And this is where he got it from. And this is where he's sending it to. And this is his IP address. And look, he's online right now. So he's home. Let's give him a visit. So that's not great.
Wait, can you expand on that? Why does he know all that about you?
Because you send your addresses to the other server asking, are these addresses on the Bitcoin blockchain?
Yeah.
So now he sees a single API request coming in with 100 addresses bundled together of like, hey, tell me how much money is on here. And the obvious assumption is that's just one guy checking all of his addresses.
Because you wouldn't normally be checking other people's addresses?
So this was one early improvement to this, is exactly what you just bring up. Let's include fake addresses.
Okay.
And basically and scan them, or we can use some other compression tricks, like other cryptography tricks, like Bloom filters. We can compress our addresses and lose some like add some ambiguity, but still get useful information. But the problem with all of these approaches is still you're sending your addresses from your computer to someone else.
Yeah.
That always happens in all of these, and that means there is extra information revealed.
Yeah. Okay.
And so what we do with Wasabi is we flip it on its head. You still don't run a full node, right? Someone else runs the full node for you, but you never send addresses to that other person. Okay. Instead, the other person, the full node, he takes a Bitcoin block, right, the list of hundreds or thousands of transactions, and he compresses it. He makes it a lot smaller into what's known as a compact block filter. And this tiny representation, like a zip file basically, of the block, gets sent to the client. Okay. And so the client never sends information to the server, but the server sends the information to the client. And now the client has all of the block filters, the compression of all the blocks, and he can now run locally a check of, is my public key included in this filter? Is my address in this filter? And if that returns no, then I know that, okay, in this filter, in this block, I did not get paid, or I did not pay anyone. Okay. But if I run my public key against that filter, it might return positive, saying that yes, something is up here. Then I create a new Tor identity, I connect to a random Bitcoin peer-to-peer node and download that block, just that block. Again, I don't send an address to someone else. I connect with a random identity to someone and say, hey, please give me that block. Just like all the other Bitcoin nodes ask the other people for blocks. And now I have the entire block uncompressed, right? And I can now see, okay, do I actually have a transaction in here where I pay someone or where I get paid? And you do that synchronization.
And you would do it on a block by block basis because you need to kind of like verify the cryptography of it, like the validity of the transactions. Like, why couldn't you just say, hey, public full node, why don't you give me all the addresses and all their current balances as of the latest block?
Yes, that's basically what we're doing. Okay. However, the important thing is you cannot verify in such an approach. The only way that you can verify a Bitcoin transaction is by having verified every transaction that came before. Right? So you need to know about every transaction that has ever happened in order to verify any given Bitcoin transaction. One unfortunate downside of the protocol. So this means Wasabi users don't fully verify the Bitcoin blockchain, unfortunately. But at least they don't leak any sensitive information to the third party.
Right.
So like on the spectrum of the compute power and difficulty of running your own full node is quite expensive.
Yeah.
Running something like an Electrum server where you trust the other parties with your privacy. The client is super simple. It loads instantly fast. And Wasabi is kind of on the left to the middle here. It is much faster than a Bitcoin full node. It requires much less computation and bandwidth. It's still not as fast as the legacy wallet, but at the very least, the privacy is almost as good as a full node. Right? Like almost no information gets revealed about yourself, and that's, I think, a good win. So
okay.
And so this the second major feature, the blockchain discovery, which again Wasabi this is on in default. In fact, you cannot even turn it off. Right? You can connect your own full nodes to it, but fundamentally this block filter approach is just how Wasabi works. And then the third major privacy problem in Bitcoin is blockchain transactions. Right? If you have one inputs, two outputs, it's very easy to see what's going on. And for this, again, we use CoinJoin. And so this is the third major privacy defense layer in Wasabi, which again is on by default. So whenever you receive Bitcoin, as soon as the money confirms, it will be sent to yourself in a CoinJoin. And you can turn that off as well in the settings, but it is on by default. Again, with the raison d'etre, we want to protect everyone, even though we have no idea what the fuck a CoinJoin is and why it is even important to do. It should be just on by default.
Cool. Great. Another question along these lines. You need like a critical mass of transactions using the same mixing service in order for this to, get off the ground. Is that
exactly right? So anonymity loves company. It's much easier to hide in a larger crowd. So the larger the crowd, the better. And that was a big problem in the early days when Wasabi started back in 2018. At the very beginning, I think it took us 2 weeks until we had a successful CoinJoin. And the CoinJoin was very small. I think like 12 inputs, 12 outputs, something like this. And so we eventually got more and more users. In the beginning, it was just the developers testing, basically. And eventually some fanboys like me joined in. But still very, very early alpha, or just experimenting. Until then, about 3 months in, a lot of users came and boosted the liquidity quite substantially. So 3 months in, we had a CoinJoin maybe every day or so. And that starts to be okay, right? The thing is still with Wasabi 1.0 back then, you needed to do quite a lot of rounds of CoinJoin in order to have a decent level of privacy.
Okay.
So the entire privacy ceremony was still multiple CoinJoin transactions and therefore multiple days or weeks. It was anything but fast. But it started getting decent. And then, throughout the last 5 years, the volumes have just, steadily improved. So that by now, in version 2.0.6, we have a CoinJoin around every 20 minutes or so. And our minimum input amount is now 180. So if we don't get enough people for at least 180 inputs in the round, then we abandon it and we don't move forward. So we see really quite substantially large transactions. I think the largest had around 420 inputs, 430 outputs, something like this. And that is quite substantial.
So in a 1 minute or a 10 minute or a 1 block period, you get 100 transactions trying to be put through Wasabi wallet. You say, we're not going to process any of these yet. Then another 10 minutes go by and you've got another 100, you've got 200 transactions, and then you process them all to maximize the privacy.
Exactly. So for your CoinJoin, you have a coordination, right? Hundreds of users need to agree. And we use a central server for this. So it's a centralized coordination protocol. And it basically has 3 API calls for all intents and purposes. First is the input registration call. So there you prove to the coordinator that, hey, I have this coin, I can spend it, I know the private key to it, and I want to register it here at this CoinJoin. And the coordinator checks that it's a valid coin, etc. And he gives you back a cookie, a magic token, so to say, an eCash credential. And then you have the second API call, which is output registration. For output registration, you can register the address and amount that you want to see on the output side of this transaction. And the coordinator checks also that you can only register for an output if you also have this magic cookie, the eCash credential, that you get at input registration. And the value of, or the size of this cookie depends on the value of the input that you register. So if you register 1 Bitcoin on the input side, you get a 1 Bitcoin token, which then on the output side allows you to register 1 Bitcoin on the output side. If you would try to register 2 Bitcoin, the coordinator would say, no, that's not valid. You did not put enough money on the input side to register the 2 Bitcoin. And finally, we have the signature registration API call. So this means after all users have registered their inputs and outputs, everyone will verify and look at this transaction. Are all of my inputs included that I want to see? And importantly, are all of my outputs included that I want to see? Right? So am I putting 5 Bitcoin in and am I getting 5 Bitcoin out? You don't want to put 5 Bitcoin in and get 1 Bitcoin out. That don't sign transactions like this. So your client verifies this and then only signs the transaction if everything's okay and sends that signature to the coordinator back with the signature registration API call. And if every user signs the transaction, we have a successful Bitcoin transaction that can now be broadcast to the peer-to-peer network and hopefully be included into a block by a miner. And now after a couple confirmations, we can be sure that this transaction is there forever.
So if I am using Wasabi wallet and I try to send some Bitcoin and then I turn off my computer before the coin join is accomplished, that is not going to go through, right?
So yes, in some phases of the coin join, like during input registration, it's okay to shut down Wasabi and just abandon the round. Nobody will care. So Wasabi allows you to shut down in these phases. But in some phases, like after output registration and before signature registration, if you drop out and don't sign, then you actually destroy the service for everyone else. Remember, if there's a Bitcoin transactions with hundreds of inputs, if only one of those inputs does not sign the final transaction at the end, it's an invalid Bitcoin transaction. Because Bitcoin full nodes verify that every input has a valid signature. Right? You cannot spend a coin that you don't know the private key to. And so you need to have the signature. And if one user doesn't provide the signature, all the other 99 users go home sad because they now have a failed coin join transaction. Now, what we can do is try again. Right? Whenever someone does not sign the coin join transaction, the coordinator, one of the services that he provides, is he kicks out the bad guys who didn't sign the transaction last time. And we do the second attempt only with the honest users who participated successfully. So the second attempt to a coin join transaction is always a bit smaller, but has a higher likelihood to succeed. And usually within like 3 to 4 attempts, we have a final transaction.
What's the, there must be a timeout to that then?
Exactly. So the input registration timeout is around 10 minutes. So after 10 minutes, we check, do we have at least 180 inputs? If no, we go back to 0 and start the input registration countout again. And if we have more, we continue to output registration, which has a timeout of 3 minutes. 2 minutes. And then finally is the signature registration, which is, I think, 3 minutes. So in total, the coin join transaction in the best case is done in less than 15 minutes. But these are currently configuration parameters, right? So the values might change.
So you get 200 transactions and you're like, okay, we're ready to go. But then it turns out, you know, let's say just one person out of the 200, for whatever reason, is no longer available. It doesn't scotch the whole thing. It just makes it take another 3 minutes as you try to reconnect with the other 199.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. So yeah, that's the downside of CoinJoin is because so many people are collaborating. The likelihood that we all agree at the end and that we're still all there at the end, especially when we're using Tor, which is known for sometimes dropping packages and just losing traffic, then you know that's a serious issue. So for example, when we launched Wasabi 2.0 back in 2022, we launched it. Years of intense work in research and development for fundamental new CoinJoin protocol and wallet architecture. It was a gigantic amount of work, paid off in the end. But so we launched it, and the couple days before the launch, a Tor denial of service attack started, where some malicious entities were specifically targeting to disrupt the Tor network from functioning. So we launched it and thought we already have all the users from the first version. This will be an awesome launch. We'll have the first successful transaction super soon.
Right.
It'll be great. It didn't happen. The first attempt failed. The second attempt failed. And after 3 or 4 days of no successful CoinJoin transaction, we really started to freak out.
Right.
Trying to find the bug in our own code base of what's going on? Why is nothing working?
Right.
Until after actually a desperate scream from me on Twitter of guys, does anyone know why our software doesn't work anymore? Someone responded, "Oh yeah, by the way, there's the Tor denial of service attack." So that then we did a lot of patches on both the back end as well as the client, Wasabi client, to update Tor, to be more efficient of how we use Tor when we create new Tor identities and Tor circuits, etc. So just a lot of further engineering to optimize it. And after another week or month of lots of pain and frustration, we actually managed a release that was much more stable. And then we finally had hundreds of inputs and such. But since then, now we have a rather battle-tested Tor architecture. The denial of service attack is over. But even if it comes back, hopefully we're more resilient for it now.
I really like the idea that crypto Twitter is part of your open source development.
Yeah. Exactly. Going back to the early point, seriously, we tried everything. We looked at it all and we had no idea. And that's why all bugs are shallow with enough eyes on the code. And it took us 20 expert engineers, breaking our heads in. And this guy on Twitter, sees a tweet, says, "Oh, lol, of course it's that," and writes a 5-second reply and solves our problem. Right? But that's only possible if we collaborate.
Awesome. Okay, so back in 2014, I was aware of mixers, right? But it seemed to me that they were, you might call it custodial or whatever, or reliant on, trust. And at some point, the mixing service could say, okay, I'm just going to keep these coins that I'm about to mix and go out of business. Do you remember that being the case?
Yeah, exactly. That was one of the reasons that was of why Wasabi started, because it was obvious that there's a huge privacy problem in Bitcoin and that there's a gigantic market demand for this problem to be solved. But the downside back then was the only solutions had enormous trust assumptions with the third party. That third party service provider, he could run away with your money, so he steals from you, and he can fully spy on you and sees everything that's happening. So a extreme trust relationship with that third party, which means only the worst type of people get attracted for providing such a service, and therefore a lot of rug pulls, a lot of hacks, where people not just got their privacy ruined in hindsight. No, and if you think that you have privacy, but with the click of a button someone else can reveal you afterward, that puts you in a really precarious situation because you assumed that you have privacy when in fact you did not, and that can cause life and death. So that's a huge issue. And even worse, they steal away with all the money. So there needed to be a solution that is better engineered, that works with way fewer trust assumptions. And CoinJoin is an old technology, first introduced in 2010. Coinjoins.org is, by the way, has a fascinating history on the CoinJoin protocol or idea. So with the idea of doing a Bitcoin transaction together, in a way, thanks to how Bitcoin works, that you do not have to give up control over your money. Right? The money only moves if you sign the transaction. And you only sign the transaction when you've verified that everything's okay. And so there is no way that anyone can run away with your money. Which is the biggest trust problem fixed, and at least the third party can no longer steal from you.
Yeah.
Which is essential. And for example, shared coin, dark wallet, and join market implemented the CoinJoin protocol. But what was still lacking then is the privacy aspect. That third-party CoinJoin coordinator, even though he couldn't run away with your money, he saw exactly what was going on, and so he could spy on you. Which is also not great, because we should assume that everyone knows what the service provider knows. Because for one, it's in the best interest to use the information in however way he sees fit. So, he might as well share it with others. Or he has bad employees, he gets hacked, he gets bought by another company, everything changes. So, and information is hard to delete, right? So that means better not share the information in the first place. And so the true innovation of Wasabi was the introduction of ZeroLink, which is a zero-knowledge CoinJoin coordination protocol. Meaning the service provider can provide the useful service of coordinating the CoinJoin and providing the denial of service protections, etc. However, he cannot spy on the user, on which input pays which output. And then, even though that was a groundbreaking innovation, it was still more of a proof of concept in terms of software architecture and design. It was very hacky, had a lot of downside. And so we worked for 3-4 years on Wasabi 2.0 and the underlying Wabi-Sabi CoinJoin protocol, the second generation of zero-knowledge CoinJoin coordination protocols, which is much more flexible, much more usable, and therefore allows us to provide a much greater developer and user experience for CoinJoins, which Wasabi 2.0 now, or BTC Pay and Trezor, all of the things that we're doing now is only possible thanks to the foundational work of Wabi-Sabi.
Yeah. I recently, like in the last year, for the first time, really had it explained to me or became aware of why like scams and what do you call it, Ponzi schemes and stuff are so successful, which is to say that their margins are like 100%, right? Like if you have some kind of service and when you get some kind of investment in your product or somebody buys something from you, you might make a margin of say 10%, right? So your advertising, you have to understand that for every, $100 that you bring in, you're going to make $10. And so your advertising has to cost less than that $10 to bring in $100, right? But if you're just stealing the money, like you can spend $90 to get $100 of investment or revenue, and it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And this is actually probably one of my, I guess, bigger fears of running a free and open source business, in the sense of like we spend 90% of our revenue or something like this on research and development. Very, very little on marketing.
Yeah.
Because we're cypherpunks, we write code, we want to see cool shit happen, and not necessarily brag about it. But then simultaneously someone else could come in, copy our code, that our excellent engineers designed, run it on the server that you rent for like $100 online, and pump all of the revenue that you get into marketing, and basically run a Ponzi scheme on top of it, like not literally, but for all intents and purposes. And I guess that would be a big threat, because it would certainly gather a lot of mind share.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like I don't even care that much if other people make more money than me. What I care about is that these tools and technologies exist.
Yeah.
So even if other people copy our code and make it more successful, I mean, I'm happy. I can retire and go home because someone else now takes over solving that damn problem.
Yeah. Okay. So if I were to get started with Wasabi, I download the wallet, and then I have to get my funds into the Wasabi wallet, right? Like, because I have my own addresses with their own private keys right now. So I'd either have to make an additional transaction to take my existing coins and spend them into a Wasabi wallet address, or I could, next time I pay, I could have the UTXO come back to a Wasabi wallet address, or am I missing something there?
Yes, so Wasabi has multiple ways that you could use it. The first way is to generate a new wallet. Right?
Hmm.
So maybe it's your first wallet ever, or you just want to start over from scratch.
Hmm.
You can, click a button and Wasabi will give you 12 words.
Yeah.
Those are the recovery phrases. Keep good care of them, write them down on paper or steel, put them in a lockbox and such.
Yeah.
And you also get a passphrase, right? The 13th word, kind of the encryption of the 12 words.
Yeah.
So that will be needed to load Wasabi and to make payments out of Wasabi. As well as if you want to back up or import this wallet into another software, like Electrum, for example, you need the 12 words plus the password that you set. The second alternative is you can import an existing set of 12 words.
Okay.
Let's say you generated a wallet on Electrum and you want to move over. Instead of generating a new wallet in Wasabi and making a payment, you could import the 12 words from Electrum into Wasabi and get the wallet this way. Here, one consideration is, so first, it's cheap, right? Because you don't have to make a Bitcoin transaction from Electrum to Wasabi.
Yes.
If you can just take the private keys and put it into Wasabi.
Yes.
And so this means you don't have to make a single user transaction from Electrum to Wasabi. You can start coin joining right away. And so that's great. The downside is if you were using Electrum and you were not running your own full node backend server, then someone else knows that these addresses belong to the same person. Maybe he knows your IP address too. So it's probably better to get a new set of private keys for the long-term future. And so then, for example,
can you expand on that part for 1 second? How is it someone at Electrum or who knows?
So Electrum is a federated, almost distributed system, something like this. So there's always a client and a server. The server runs the full node. The client has the private keys. But the client always sends the public keys to Electrum, to the server. The thing is, you can run your own server, and there's a bunch of servers run for free online. Right? So the developers of Electrum, some enthusiasts of Electrum, but also a lot of surveillance companies are running these public Electrum servers and gathering data. Right? So by default, when you connect to Electrum, you connect to a random set of servers. We might not exactly be sure who those are. So that is a concern. Unfortunately, again, Wasabi is basically the only wallet that protects you from this attack, other than running a Bitcoin full node yourself. So basically, if that's the situation, right, you have a secure wallet, but you might have broken your privacy here, then import the old set of keys in Wasabi, generate a new set of keys in Wasabi, and then you can coin join from one wallet to the other. Right? So we go on the input side of the coin join transaction, you register the coins on addresses of the old wallet. And so you're spending the coins from the old wallet. But on the output side, you're not putting the output addresses of the old wallet. You're generating new addresses from the new wallet, which nobody has seen this address in the past or knows that these public keys belong to the same person. And then you get some privacy, and it's still quite cheap. So this is a usual way of doing it. And then the third option is if you use a hardware wallet. So hardware wallets are, of course, interesting because it's a dedicated computing device to generate and store and use the private key. They're great, very useful. And Wasabi Wallet was one of the first wallets to integrate most hardware wallets that are out there. So you can use Trezor, Ledger, Coldcard, Bitbox, Jade. All of these should work quite well. With the one caveat, you cannot do coin joins with those, with any of them. Because signing coin join transactions, multi-user transactions, on a hardware wallet, on an offline signing device, is not trivial. There need to be not just security checks on the software companion app, but also in the hardware wallet itself, the firmware needs to be aware of this coin join transaction and follow a strict protocol to ensure that you're not losing money. And as of now, only the Trezor hardware wallet has this firmware with the capability of signing coin join transactions. And only the Trezor Suite desktop application has the software companion app logic that is needed for securely signing CoinJoin transactions with a hardware wallet. So only the Trezor hardware connected to Trezor Suite right now can sign CoinJoin transactions. And maybe in some future, when we get to it, quite a lot of work, this will also work with Wasabi wallet. So you can connect the Trezor to Wasabi wallet and do CoinJoin transactions there. And then even longer in the future, this will also work with other hardware wallets. I think all manufacturers are very interested in this technology and or to some extent, more or less working on it, but it's quite a lot of work and will certainly take some more time before that's rolled up in production.
Okay. So when I am like moving my Bitcoin to Wasabi, any addresses or UTXOs that currently have 0.1 Bitcoin or more will be charged a small fee. Is that how it goes?
Exactly. So let's say you have 10 coins, 10 UTXOs in your wallet. Basically, you have paid 10 times in the past, something like this. I don't know, 3 of those coins are 100,000 sats, 500,000 sats, 700,000 sats.
Yep.
And for all of these 3 UTXOs, total value of, I don't know, 0.011 Bitcoin or what, you don't pay any fee. But then the other 7 coins that are, 0.2, 0.5, 1 Bitcoin, 7 Bitcoin, 50 Bitcoin, you do pay 0.3% of the fee to the coordinator. And then the second fee that you pay is for block space. And so the coordinator fee you pay so that Wasabi gets developed and gets better. And the block space fee you pay to the miner so that your transactions get confirmed.
Okay. So with Bitcoin roughly 70K, let's say, 1.01 Bitcoin is about $700. And you're taking 0.3% of that?
Yes.
So $21. My math's correct?
I'm not that great at math either. That's why I have computers,
Wait, maybe it's $2.
I think it's $2.10. I think 21
Okay.
cents. Yeah.
0.3. Do I have a percent on this? 0.3%, right?
Yep.
Okay, $2. Wow. Okay. So as a one-time fee, I can take my wallet that has $700 worth of Bitcoin in it and put it into Wasabi, and I can coin join endlessly from there for a one-time fee of $2.
Yep.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Kind of like getting back to what we were talking earlier about like the marketing or whatever. Like I didn't understand the value proposition looking at your website, but now that we've talked about it for almost an hour, I am understanding much better.
Nice.
What
we're good at writing code. We're not good at writing website pitches.
Yeah, I can relate. I can relate for sure. Okay. Let's go into the rapid fire section of the interview because we're running a little bit over time. I like to try and keep these to an hour. First question. I have what's called what do I call it? The Medley Bitcoin Maximalism Test. Your favorite uncle or whatever passes away, and in his will, he offers you either $100,000 in Bitcoin, which must sit in trust for 10 years, and then you can do whatever you want with it, or X $100,000 of an altcoin index fund, which you must also hold for 10 years, at which point you can do whatever you want. What is X for you? Like, what's the breaking point where you would choose altcoin fund instead of the Bitcoin?
Oof. For 10 years? So that's like 2.5 halvings. I mean, altcoins are like gonna be what, maybe 1% of Bitcoin's market cap. So right now they're like what, 30? or something. So we're talking about a 30x drop. So yeah, let's put it a factor of 50.
All right, very good. So you need, I think, 5 million then. 50 times that 100,000.
Yeah, probably. Sounds little. Maybe it should be more.
See, so your score then is 5,000. Ben Prentice, who we had on episode 3, scored 10,000 on the maximalism
Oh,
test.
I see. I'm not bullish enough.
I'm around 200. So not super maximalist myself. Um um uh last episode, which unfortunately is not published yet, so you wouldn't have had a chance to see it even if you wanted to. We were speaking with a professional investor and consultant who invests both in traditional stuff and crypto. And my kind of like pet peeve or my message or whatever is that I suggest that most people are losing money, like trading Bitcoin. Okay, here's my pet peeve. Let me put it this way. My pet peeve is that so many people view crypto as like the casino, like you have to trade in order to make money in crypto. And I think that that's a very foolish way to look at it. And I kind of like closed it out, I would say, by suggesting that you don't necessarily have to uh, try to trade or invest in whatever meme coin you think might go up, but you can actually invest in your knowledge and your skills and learn about crypto, and you will become more valuable. Those skills will become more valuable as crypto goes up. Like you might not be in a position where you can get into a full-time crypto job or whatever, but maybe you could become at your work the guy that everybody's like, oh, this is the guy who knows about Bitcoins, the guy who knows about crypto, the woman who knows about crypto. So how might you suggest people could get more involved and like, grow into their crypto knowledge in that way?
Well, I think for one, it's about realizing that Bitcoin is not here as an investment. Bitcoin is the exact opposite to an investment. Bitcoin is base money, right? It's not a claim on anything else. It's not a security that someone else promised you that you will get more of something. You have this dumb, stupid rock. It doesn't move. It doesn't multiply, right? It doesn't rot. It's just a number, right? And it stays the same. So that means whenever you hold base money, that you're not investing, you're saving your money, because there are not entrepreneurs out there that do a good enough job to convince you to hold the security of base money, that's something that nobody can take away from you, and give it to someone else in the hope that in the future he will give you more base money back. That is a trade that most entrepreneurs fail at today. Thanks to fiat hyperinflation and the Cantillon effect, we have ruined our production stages. Every entrepreneur is working on some bullshit that nobody needs or wants, and most entrepreneurs are shit, and they shouldn't be invested in, and you shouldn't give them their money, neither for equity nor for debt. And so what you do, you hold your Bitcoin until the entrepreneurs get their shit together and be more productive again, so that they actually provide you a profitable return that is more than just the cost of holding money. So Bitcoin is here because we want to tell the entrepreneurs that they fucked up and that they should refocus on what's actually important in life, and not just building the next horrible fiat architecture house and such things. So yeah, Bitcoin is the exact opposite for investing. And what we've seen is that apparently we're in a massive bust phase, economically speaking, because the value of base money is going through the roof, right? The value of Bitcoin goes up and up and up, which means all entrepreneurs are not profitable, right? They're not doing a good enough job. And so yeah, holding base money is a very rational and great financial choice right now. Because not investing is the best when we have a base money that is still in its appreciation phase.
All right. We'll close it out with this. What, given my distaste for, focusing on, number go up of Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff and trading and all that, do you have any like predictions or, thoughts about what might happen in the future with those kinds of things?
Yeah, Bitcoin blocks will continue to be mined. The number of UTXOs will likely increase. And that's basically all I can say.
All right. But we do know that you think that Bitcoin will go up, what did we say, like 500 times compared to altcoins?
At least, yeah. No, so like Bitcoin doesn't need to though. That's the cool thing. Like, sure,
Yeah.
if more people use it and it goes up in value, that's great. We're all happy.
Yeah.
If it goes down in value by a factor of 10x, 100x, it's still fine because the
Yeah.
people who really need it will have it, and
Yeah.
that's what we can ask for.
All right. Very good. Max, where can people connect with you?
Yes, go to towardsliberty.com. That's a link with all the other stuff, and I'm most active nowadays on Muster. So find me there, max at towardsliberty.com.
Great. This was very enjoyable for me. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Hopefully, I can have you back because I didn't even get into my personal questions about like, how can I, get out there and make some kind of like Wasabi wallet or whatever. But another time.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing, right? So after you realize that every other entrepreneur is shit, then you're like, okay, maybe I can do better. And if I
Yeah.
can do better, then I can convince all the other people to give me their sats. And that's ultimately like entrepreneurs are going to have a wild time with Bitcoin upcoming. So enjoy the building.
Very good. All right. Thanks to everybody watching. Please do all the things you would normally do to support a podcast that you enjoy. Subscribe, like, share, all those things. Thanks again to my guest, Max Hillebrand, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.